Senate Labor Committee. Glad you all are here. We're going to wait just another couple of minutes to see if our Chairman Sparks joins us, or Chairman Harkins joins us, and if not, we'll move forward. All right, well, we're going to move forward with our bills on the agenda today. We're going to start with bill number 2431, and that bill has to do with law enforcement officers who test positive for illegal drug use, and to provide for terms of suspension pending the receipt of results from a follow-up test. And if you look at the bill, it talks about using hair follicle as a follow-up test. And if the hair follicle test proves negative, then the officer is, my reading of this would be reimbursed. If not, then it would stand as is. So that's the bill, and I will be glad to try to answer any questions if you have any. Pardon me? Yes, we do.
And I understand that you're not the author of this bill, so you may not answer this question. My understanding is that if you test positive, that there's an A and a B sample. If your A sample tests positive, then they check your B sample to see if the level is high enough in your B sample that it's not a false positive. So, and you double that with, we have drug courts all around this state, and urinalysis is what they use for that. And if people pop positive on urinalysis in drug court, they can be sent to jail and you lose their freedom. So I'm trying to see why it should be different level for law enforcement than it is for people who are in drug court, since you have an A sample and a B sample. So I'm just trying to see if that is in fact how it is, where they test your A sample. If your A sample is positive, then they test the B sample to see if the levels are high enough in the B sample to where it wouldn't be a false positive.
So exactly what is your question?
If is that the current? Is that the current? Yeah, this is that the current uh, standard where they test your A sample. If your A sample pops for a positive, then they test the B sample to see if the level is high enough in the B sample that it's an accurate positive. I'm just trying to see is that the current process that it goes through.
Senator, I'm not sure that I know what the current process is, but I know this bill is requesting that that we give the officer a second test. And I think we have, if you'll identify yourself and speak into the microphone so that we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Leonard Prine, and I'm actually a retired chief deputy with the Etowah County Sheriff's Department here in the state, and I currently work for the Southern States Police Benevolent Association, and we're the one that has sponsored this bill. To give you a little background on this bill, we had a case, it's approximately 2 years ago, in Meridian, where we had an officer that was at a stop sign, and he was rear-ended by another vehicle. Well, according to departmental policy, he was required to submit to a urinalysis test for any types of drugs. I'm sure that was for insurance purposes. But anyway, he took this test, and it came back positive for marijuana. And so, to give you a little background on this guy, he had served over 20-something years in the military and had gotten out. And of course, he had been subject to tests his whole time in that. Plus, law enforcement is required to do random drug screening tests to begin with. But in this state, and not just this state, but all states, urinalysis tests have been found to not be accurate, not 100% reliable. And to give you examples of this, I know the senator here is asking this question, but even in the Department of Corrections in this state, I personally have friends that are probation officers. They are not allowed to even revoke a person on probation for one drug test. They're required to have multiple drug tests in this state in order to even revoke that, and that is because of false positive tests. We're going back to hair follicle tests. Hair follicle tests, where a urinalysis test only gives you a record going back, say, a week maximum is all it's going to show. A hair follicle test will go back a matter of months, and it is more accurate. It's been proven to be more accurate. So in this case, when you're dealing with law enforcement, and I understand the senator's concern here, but you're talking about ending a law enforcement officer's career, that we go to the academy and are trained in this, and if he is simply terminated for a false positive test, the sheriff or chief of police has to send his certificate back in to the Board of Minimum Standards who certifies us as law enforcement officers, and he has to list a reason why that officer was terminated. So if he sends that in and says, this officer was terminated for use of marijuana, even though it's a false positive, that's career ending. They're going to revoke his certification. And you're not talking about a person just losing their job. You're talking about losing their entire career. So we are here to introduce this bill for the simple fact that urinalysis tests are not 100% accurate tests, and they're very well known for false positive tests. And to give you another example, you know, people always hear in court about taking lie detector tests. Well, lie detector tests are not admissible in a court of law because they're not 100% accurate tests. So we're not condoning an officer. If an officer's out here doing marijuana or whatever, he should be fired. All we're asking for is a more accurate test to have him pay out of his pocket. Now, I want you to keep in mind, if an officer has already tested positive for a urinalysis test and he's been terminated, we're going to make him pay out of his own pocket to have that hair follicle test. And number one, he's not going to pay out of his pocket to take a hair follicle test that proves he's guilty and still be fired. So he's not going to pay $300 to $500 for a hair follicle test to prove his innocence unless he in fact is innocent of that, which the hair follicle test would prove that.
Thank you.
So I hope that answers any concerns.
Well, my question was, When they do the urinalysis test, is there an A sample and a B sample?
Not to my knowledge, not as far as law enforcement. Now, I don't know, you're talking about a whole different system than what I am. Now, they may do that in a drug court, but to our knowledge, all that's required is a simple urinalysis test that they send off and it comes back. So we're asking for a backup.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that
Thank you.
question. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why not a blood test?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a question. What is the cost of a hair follicle test? What is the cost of that?
What is the cost?
Honestly, I don't directly know the cost now, but we're talking,
Speak into the microphone, please.
sorry. 10 years ago, it cost approximately $300. Now, I haven't kept up with what the continuing cost. Of course, y'all know everything goes up, but it would be expensive that he would be paying out of his pocket. And then we're just asking if he does pass that test, that with him being, his department reimbursing him that money at that point.
Thank you,
But
Madam
I
Chair.
wish I could give you that answer, but I don't really know. I haven't checked the labs lately.
Can you provide the information for us, please?
Yes, we could get it for you. Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Senator. All right, are there any other questions? Okay. Yes, Senator.
On the hair follicle test, if you've used within, say, the past 5 days, would that show up on the hair follicle test?
Yes.
Are you positive about that? Because your hair would have to grow enough for it to show up in that particular hair follicle, would it not?
Yes, sir, but you also brought up the point of a blood test, and the blood is associated in your scalp to the hair follicle itself. So it would, when you pluck that hair, you're getting the root and all.
Thank you.
So it would be accurate.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you very much for your assistance.
I'm sorry. This is my first time, so bear with me. The hair follicle test, when we ask that be done, we're not stretching a time frame out here that we would let it bleed out of their system. So we're requiring that within 48 hours. So, what I'm saying, a hair follicle test would actually show usage a lot longer period of time than the urinalysis was. So if he had smoked marijuana, it would show, up a month ago that, hey, he smoked marijuana. So it's not only more accurate, but it also gives a longer indication.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Senator. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion? Okay, we do have a motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion passes and the bill will be reported out. Okay, the second bill we have to take up today is Bill number 2849. And this bill is double referred to Labor and to Finance. And if you will note on the Senate bill, this bill says that an employer must not grant recognition rights for employees solely and exclusively on the basis of signed union authorization card if the selection of a bargaining representative may instead be conducted through secret ballot elections by the National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB. And what the second thing this bill says is it must not voluntarily disclose an employee's personal contact information to a labor organization or to a third party acting on behalf of the labor organization without the employee's prior written consent, unless there's required by state or federal law. And then the third thing that this bill does is it must not sign a neutrality agreement with a labor organization and must not require a subcontractor performing work for or providing services to the employer to engage in these prohibited activities. The fourth thing is to provide for reporting of violations to the Mississippi Attorney General. And next is to specify that the requirements of this act apply only to agreements executed on or after this act, to require the state to execute a separate agreement with the recipient of an economic development incentive, reserving the right of the state to recover the monies dispersed by the state if the recipient benefiting from such incentive fails to comply with this act, and to specify the required term for such an agreement and for related purposes. So if you'll look in section 1, what it reads is the legislature finds that the state of Mississippi, as part of the economic development policy, has the right to set terms and conditions in connection with awarding of economic development incentives. And it ought to play an integral role in the formulation of economic incentives, conditions of grants, general management of compliance with such awards. So the section 1 has to do with the economic incentives section. And if you look at section 2, it reads that it is the intent of the legislature as part of its economic development that whenever state funds or benefits are sought by private business, such benefits shall be conditioned on the private business agreeing not to waive its employees' right to a secret ballot election when recognizing a labor organization as a bargaining unit or requiring subcontractors to waive their employee right to secret ballot election. That was item 2. And then section 2 are definitions, if you look at the bill there. And I'll take you down to section 2I, grant recognition rights for employees. To be eligible for an economic development incentive, an employer must not grant recognition rights for employees solely and exclusively on the basis of signed union authorization cards if the selection of a bargaining representative may instead conduct secret ballots through the NLRB. And I think we move into some more I voluntarily disclose an employee's personal contact information, which we've already talked about, sign a neutrality agreement, which we've already talked about that in the opening. And that is pretty much the bill. It's talking about giving economic development incentives. So I'll be glad to answer questions as I can on this bill. This is Senator Harkin's bill, and it is referred to labor and then to finance. If there are no questions, do I have a motion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill will be reported. Do I have a motion? Thank you very much. Thank y'all for helping me get through my first meeting as a chairman.